Yeah. But my name's Bhakti Caitanya Swami. I'll be here for a week. Happy to get your association and the mercy of Shri Shri Nitai Mayapur Chandra. I was asked this evening to say a few words about the personal relationships between Lord Caitanya and some of his associates. What do you think of that? Sounds interesting, yeah. Personal relationships. We just finished yesterday. We just finished a few hours ago a retreat in the Drakensberg about the heart of Vaishnav relationships. It was interesting. A couple of you were there. Yes. A couple of you were there. Did you find it interesting?
Well, that's another statement, but yes, it was amazing.
I see. Well, okay. Anyway, I'm happy that you felt it was worthwhile. So let us, though, try and explore a little bit. We could actually have a whole seminar for the whole week about Lord Caitanya and his relationships with his associates, because there's quite a number of associates to start off with. And a lot of the relationships, the information that we have about those relationships, there's a lot of information, and a lot of those relationships were very deep, extremely deep. Yeah, like in another dimension, from another dimension. Can I just ask one simple technical question? Could I have a little water, please? It would have to be on another little table. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let us launch into the subject matter. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Yes, well, when we talk about the associates of Lord Caitanya, the first person generally we would have to mention would be Lord Nityananda. After all, he is directly a form of the Supreme Lord himself, but he is the form of the Supreme Lord, a form of the Supreme Lord in a very specific and special mood. And therefore the relationship between him and Lord Chaitanya is really very, very extraordinary, very amazing. Lord Nityananda. Well, if we want to understand Lord Nityananda, then we have to understand, or try as much as we're able, to understand Lord Balaram, because they are the same person. And Lord Nityananda's nature, personality, character, it's really just a manifestation of the nature of Lord Balaram. Balaram being the first expansion of Lord Krishna. Because he's the first expansion means he is the closest person there is to Krishna himself, along with Srimati Radharani, who is even closer really, because she is actually a part of Krishna. She is his pleasure potency, manifest external to himself. Just here, thanks. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, so Srimati Radharani is a part of the person of Lord Krishna, but placed separately from himself. So who's closer? Radharani as part of himself, or Lord Balaram as himself, just expanded? Well, let's just say, I think a good answer to that question would be Hare Krishna. Thank you. That would be sufficient, really. But as a result of the closeness or even just the oneness, Lord Balaram and Srimati Radharani are sometimes considered to be the original spiritual masters because they know Krishna the best. Really, really the best. Because they are part of him or they are him, so what can you say? And Lord Balaram, Srila Jiva Goswami, one of our great acharyas, who we're going to mention in terms of his relationship with Lord Chaitanya. Well, Srila Jiva Goswami discusses the point of, well, what he says is, if you ask Krishna, who is God, Krishna will say, me. If you ask Lord Balaram, who is God, Lord Balaram will say, Krishna. He has the right to say, me. He completely has the right, but he doesn't, usually. He says Krishna, because he is in the mood of being a devotee, Lord Balaram, even though he's the first expansion, and he's just non-different from Lord Krishna. Still, he is in the mood of a devotee, of being a servant of the Lord. Among other things, among other reasons, because it is much nicer to be a devotee of God than even to be God. That might sound a little fantastic. We won't get into it too much tonight, but still it tends to be like that. So Lord Balaram then is in the mood of a devotee. And this is explained Thank you. Hare Krishna, good girl. What a good girl. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Yeah, so Jiva Goswami goes into a whole description. It's really pretty profound. How Lord Balaram, he's so much in the mood of being a devotee of Krishna that he does all sorts of things and he expands himself in all sorts of forms in order to serve Krishna in all sorts of different ways. You know, we're not going to go into all the intricacies of that, although it's worthy of in-depth discussion. But let us just say, as a few examples, just a handful, that the spiritual world is expanded from Lord Balaram for Krishna's pleasure. So Krishna has a place to enjoy. The material world is expanded from Lord Balaram. Even in terms of Krishna's very personal situation, Krishna's palace, Krishna's clothes, Krishna's shoes, Krishna's seat or seats, Krishna's even umbrella. Just to mention a few, a handful. These are all forms of Lord Balaram. Because Balaram is so much in the mood of serving the Lord. He expands himself in all these different ways to facilitate Krishna. Even we probably mentioned here before, you may have seen one picture painting of Krishna, little baby Krishna, small Krishna, floating on a large leaf. Have you seen such a picture before? Have you seen? Yes. Anyway, Krishna's on his back, little Krishna, lying on his back, floating on this leaf which is floating on some water. And Krishna's sucking one of his big toes. It's a famous picture. And one devotee asked Krishna, "Why are you sucking your toe?" And Krishna said, "You know, I've heard so many devotees say that my lotus feet are very sweet. And I just wanted to find out for myself. And I can say, having tested, I can say that it's true," Krishna said, "that my lotus feet are actually very sweet." And Krishna floated away, continuing to suck on one of his big toes. That leaf is a form of Balaram. So there's all sorts of just extraordinary pieces of information about how Balaram serves Krishna. It is just completely fantastic. And Lord Nityananda is none other than Balaram. So I thought to begin that I just read one verse from Caitanya Charitamrita. It's Adi Leela chapter 5 verse 1. Chapter is the glories of Lord Nityananda Balaram, and it's the first verse. And it is the first of, there's a number of definitive verses at the beginning of Caitanya Charitamrita, really clarifying, first of all, who is Lord Chaitanya, then who is Lord Nityananda. So this is one of these verses then, clarifying who is Lord Nityananda. Adi Leela chapter 5 verse 1. Vande Nanta Bhutaishvaryam Sri Nityanandam Ishvaram Yasye Chaya Tatswarupam Agye Napi Nirupyate. Let me offer my obeisances to Lord Sri Nityananda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose opulence is wonderful and unlimited. By his will, even a fool can understand his identity. And I am living proof of that. Really, seriously. I mean, of course, there are degrees of understanding, but at least in a basic sense, yeah. we know who is Lord Nityananda. So, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, these are the two main biographies. Chaitanya Charitamrita is the main biography, and Chaitanya Bhagavat also. In these two literatures, there are many descriptions of Lord Nityananda and different things he did in his relationship with Lord Chaitanya. We could, and actually we do, have a seminar over several days just talking about Lord Nityananda and his relationship with Lord Chaitanya. But let us just mention a couple of things. Lord Nityananda, he is in that same mood of being the servant, but more specifically, he's in the mood of being a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And therefore, he understands the mood of Lord Chaitanya, and he is really very concerned and enthusiastic to fulfill the desires of Lord Chaitanya. This is the natural mood of a good servant, to understand the desires of the master and to try to fulfill those desires. This is what being a servant means, and even you could say this is what love means, to understand the desires of the beloved and to try to fulfill them in selfless ways. So therefore, Lord Nityananda, understanding as we sing, do we sing here every day? Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Taya Karamore. Okay. Oh, right, okay. There it is. Second verse there on the left. Patita Pavana Hetu Tava Avatar. That Patita Pavana, it means the deliverer of the fallen. Hetu means the cause or the reason. Tava Avatar means your descent into this world. So the reason, the cause for your descent into this world, Lord Chaitanya, that's who he's addressing, is Patita Pavana. You are the deliverer of the most fallen, and you want to deliver the most fallen. Yes. So, Lord Nityananda, understanding that, you could say, most foundational desire in the heart of Lord Chaitanya, he made it his business in life to help do that. And the prime example, most famous example of him going out of his way and even risking his life in a certain sense to do that is in the deliverance of Jagai and Madai. I won't go through the story because I'm sure you all know the story very well. But there's another song, I think it's actually by Lochan Das Thakur, in which the singer is talking about the mercy of Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda is just so incredibly merciful to the fallen souls. And he says, Tar Sakshi Jagai Madai, means the evidence or the proof of that is Jagai and Madai. Yeah, these hopeless cases, just degraded. You know, sometimes we use this term, you find this term in our literature, here and there you'll find this term, the most fallen. The most fallen. And sometimes some of us, our contemporary devotees, may, if they're in a sort of pessimistic mood, may say, oh, I'm the most fallen. But as we've mentioned many times before, and probably here too, many times, one devotee came before Prabhupada once and said like that, Srila Prabhupada, I'm just the most fallen. And Prabhupada said, actually, you are not the most anything. You are simply insignificant. Because you could even be proud of being the most fallen. You're not as fallen as me. Because to be the most, actually the most fallen, that's quite an achievement. You'd really have to just make such an effort to be the most fallen. But they say Jagai and Madai were actually the most fallen. And Lord Nityananda, it was his mood, it was his program of activity that every day he would go out at that particular point in time, the time of Jagai and Madai. He was going out every day with Srila Haridas Thakur, another great devotee and great associate of Lord Caitanya. They were going out and preaching in Navadvip town, where in sort of around the different areas in that town where Lord Caitanya himself appeared in this world. And Lord Nityananda, he's ready to deliver anyone. Basically, you know what they would do? They would they'd go door to door, knock on the door, someone would open the door, and they would say to him or her, Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. Chant Krishna, worship Krishna, Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. Chant Krishna, worship Krishna, and follow the teachings of Krishna. Koro Krishna Shiksha literally means do the teachings, but apply the teachings, follow the teachings, and that's what they do. And they go to the next door. Yeah. But Lord Nityananda, he always had his eyes, he was always looking around for special opportunities. People who were not just sort of normal fallen, typical fallen, sort of Cape Town fallen or something like that. He would be looking for those who were just really fallen. Because this was his mood. He knew Patita Pavana Hetu Tava Avatar. Lord Caitanya, my Lord, has come specifically, mainly, because he wants to deliver the fallen. So I must find those who are really seriously fallen, not just sort of, the half-hearted fallen ones. So he's always looking around for these special cases. And then one day, they were in one particular area, and he's asking people, where can we find fallen people? And someone said, well, watch out for Jagai and Madai, because they're just the worst. And immediately Nityananda was just like, wow, where are they? Where are they? And he just went straight to them. Anyway, you all know the story. It's really quite a story. But he delivered them on that basis. Because he was thinking, actually, that my Lord Chaitanya is famous, is known as the deliverer of the fallen. So I want people to see that he really has delivered the fallen. And then people will be more convinced, oh yeah, really, he's definitely Patita Pavana. Yeah? And he'll become famous for that. And when my Lord becomes famous, I'm just so happy. It's just the most wonderful thing, because it's the way it should be. So this was Lord Nityananda then. As I said, we could just go on about Lord Nityananda, actually. But let's touch on some other associates of Lord Chaitanya who had, that's a particular type of relationship. You take Advaita Acharya. I think you all know who is Advaita Acharya on the altar there. Advaita Acharya, he's arguably the next closest associate of Lord Chaitanya. But in terms of the transcendental program of the appearance of the Lord and how he appeared and when and where his associates appeared, so they could all come together in due course and just all be together as a big transcendental team. Advaita Acharya, he appeared a generation, or even, generation means what? 25, 30 years or something along those lines. So it was about that, but a little more, maybe 30 years, maybe a little plus, before Lord Chaitanya appeared. Yeah. So in those terms, he was quite senior to Lord Chaitanya. And as a result, Lord Chaitanya was very respectful towards Advaita Acharya, because Advaita Acharya, he was, 30 years or so older, the same age as Lord Chaitanya's parents. And on top of that, he was the leader of all the devotees, the whole Vaishnav community of many thousands, tens of thousands at least, in that area, in that district. So Lord Chaitanya, keeping those things in mind, whenever he would see Advaita Acharya, he would immediately bow down on the ground and offer obeisances. But in another sense, a very, very transcendental sense of who is the Supreme Lord and who are his different expansions and forms, then in that sense, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, directly. Whereas Advaita Acharya is an expansion. He's an expansion. So in that sense, he's definitely, clearly in a lower position. And he knows that. So, when he would see Lord Chaitanya, he would want to offer obeisances with that in mind. But, he was 30-odd years older. And when Lord Chaitanya was really manifesting his pastimes, Lord Chaitanya was now like 20, in his 20s, that sort of stage of life. So he's an adult, means Advaita Acharya is maybe plus or minus 60, something like that. He's not a young man. So, and when you get to that age, if you haven't reached that age, I can inform you as one who has, that the body doesn't work as quickly as it used to. Oh my gosh, it's just really different. So Advaita Acharya, he would see Lord Chaitanya, he'd want to offer obeisances, but Lord Chaitanya would see him. And Lord Chaitanya is young, strong young man. Of course, he's the Supreme Lord, but in another sense, he's a strong young man. And he would be much faster. And he would offer obeisances to Advaita Acharya before Advaita Acharya could. And sometimes he'd come running up in front of him, just, and Advaita Acharya would not be able to bow down because Lord Chaitanya is right at his feet. So it really bothered Advaita Acharya. It really bothered him very badly that I am his junior, inferior, but he will not accept me like that. It is wrong, and I just don't like it. So Advaita Acharya thought, I must do something about this. I must put this Caitanya in somehow make a strategy, put him in such a position where he is forced to accept me as a junior. And specifically he thought, I must do something to force him to chastise me. Really get on my case heavily. Because you don't get on the case of your seniors. At least according to Vedic culture or human culture. In quasi-human culture, you can get on anyone's case. Be like Donald Trump, yeah. Doesn't matter who they are, what they've done for the country. You know, you just get on their case. Why not, if you feel like it? But that's not Vedic culture, it's not even human culture, actually. It's far from it. So, yes, so Advaita Acharya is thinking how to force him so he has to chastise me. And then I'll feel good because then it'll be clear. He has accepted me as a junior. So Advaita Acharya devised like a super special strategy. What a strategy, my gosh. He decided to preach Mayavad. If you know what Mayavad is, it's a very offensive philosophy in which you say everyone is God, everything is God, it's all one. I am God, you are God, the dog is God, the pig is God, the cockroach is God. Just everyone and everything is God. It's terrible, actually. It's terrible. Just imagine if you suddenly found all these people came up to you and saying that they're you, and they're telling everybody that they're you, and they're trying to get facilities which are due to you. They're trying to get them for themselves. Oh, you owe money to whoever? Well, I'm him, you can give me the money. Isn't it? It's offensive, it's terrible. So Advaita Acharya started to do that. Extremely enthusiastically. Oh boy, he was just proclaiming it far and wide, loud and clear. We're all God. And Lord Chaitanya heard about this. And Lord Chaitanya, when he heard about this, he thought, no, not Advaita Acharya, he'd never do that. It's just some crazy rumor. But then Then he heard it again from someone else, and then again from another person, and again and again and again, until he realized something is really strange here. So he went to meet with Advaita Acharya. Lord Chaitanya at the time was living in Mayapur, but Advaita Acharya at that time was in Shantipur. It's some distance away, it's, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 kilometers or something away. He had a residence there, and a residence very close to Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur, but he was in Shantipur at the time. So Lord Chaitanya went there with Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur. And they came walking in, or sort of approaching the house. And Advaita Acharya came running out. And he just came racing over to them and embraced Lord Chaitanya and said, "Have you heard the news? It's all one. We're all God. And the dog is God, and the bird is God, and the tree is God. Isn't that wonderful?" And Lord Chaitanya initially was just a bit sort of, staggered by all of that. And Advaita Acharya was just like, wow, totally enthusiastic. So Lord Chaitanya actually questioned him. Do you mean that impersonal knowledge, that there's a place for it? Yes, it's wonderful. But what about Lord Chaitanya said, but what about pure devotional service? Advaita Acharya said, no. Devotion without impersonal spiritual knowledge is too weak. Yes. Hasn't got enough strength. So yes, we need this. And I'm telling people about this, and it's wonderful, isn't it? And Lord Chaitanya got so totally disturbed. He physically attacked Advaita Acharya, who's, 30-something years or so older than him. He's not a young man. And Lord Chaitanya knocked him to the ground and jumped on top of him. And it sounds extreme. It was extreme. The situation was extreme. And Lord Chaitanya started hitting him and shouting at him. Why are you doing this? You're misleading the people. And Lord Chaitanya told him, the only reason I came from the spiritual world to here, the only reason I came was because you asked me to. And now you're doing this to me. What is this? Bang! Oh yeah, it was no joke. And poor Advaita Acharya's wife, she was just bewildered. And she approached Lord Nityananda and said, stop him. My husband's an old man, he may die. And Lord Nityananda just went, sorry. So, yes. But then Advaita Acharya, this is all going on. Lord Chaitanya saw Advaita Acharya was actually very happy. Every time the Lord hit him, Shri Shri Nitai Mayapur Chandra Ki Jai. Or every time Lord Chaitanya would hit him, Advaita Acharya would just become happier. Haribol! Hit me again. Bang. Oh, thank you. And Lord Chaitanya, when he saw this, Lord Chaitanya stopped. And Advaita Acharya said, thank you so much. this is the best day of my life. You have finally accepted me as your servant by chastising me. Thank you. So anyway, that's one little thing about Advaita Acharya. Not that their relationship was like that all the time, but it's just a very interesting part of it. Then I thought of mentioning a little about the 6 Goswamis, whose pictures are also on the altar. In a certain sense, arguably, they're kind of even closer to Lord Chaitanya than the Panchatattva. Yeah, it's all very transcendental, but they are, in Krishna Lila, they are manjaris, who are the most intimate assistants of Srimati Radharani. So they are, like in the conjugal pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Lord Nityananda, he is not involved at all. Rather, he very consciously stays away. His mood, his relationship is very different. But the manjaris, they're right there with Srimati Radharani, assisting in the most intimate conjugal pastimes. So in that sense, they're even more special than even Lord Nityananda or Advaita Acharya, in that type of sense. So I wanted to just tell one little story, or maybe a couple, of Lord Chaitanya with Sanatana Goswami. Well, actually, I'm going to read a verse from Caitanya Charitamrita, but let me just tell you the story before that. That when Lord Chaitanya was living in Jagannath Puri, Sanatana Goswami would visit him sometimes. Yeah. And when he came and visited, he would stay with Haridas Thakur. Anyway, that's there's a whole story behind that. But he wouldn't actually stay with Lord Chaitanya. He stayed down the road a few hundred, a little distance. But he would come to see Lord Chaitanya every day. So one day he arrived, it was midsummer, and in India, of course, midsummer, it really is hot. We, unless you've experienced it, you wouldn't really understand it. But it's like being permanently in a sauna. Yeah, but you can't escape. You can turn on the air conditioning if you can find any, and if the electricity is working. But anyway, so it was midsummer, 45, maybe 50 degrees. It's really hot. And Sanatana Goswami arrived. And Lord Chaitanya saw that Sanatana Goswami's feet, the soles of his feet, were blistered from heat. He was walking barefoot, and somehow he was walking on some surface which was just very, very hot. So Lord Chaitanya asked him, what happened? Why are your feet like that? And Sanatana Goswami said, well, I came here, I walked along the beach, and the sand was very hot, and as a result my feet got blistered. And Lord Chaitanya asked him, well, why did you walk along the beach? That's the long way. Why didn't you just walk down the main street, past the front entrance to the big temple? It's shorter and your feet wouldn't get burnt. And Sanatana Goswami said, well, I didn't want to do that because actually at that time he had a skin condition, very severe skin condition, in which on his body were many large open sores which were oozing. And he had no doctor, Toshine, to look after him, so he just had to deal with it, just tolerate it. So he said, I've got these sores, they ooze. And particularly right outside the entrance to the big temple, this big entrance to the big temple, out there, coming and going, there's so many people, it's very busy, and there are many of the priests who are going on the altar to worship the deity, coming and going. So if I walk past, these people, they don't really look where they're going so much. So inevitably, some of them would brush past me. And it's quite likely that a pujari or a few of the pujaris who are on their way to go on the altar and worship the Jagannath deities, they're going to just sort of brush or even knock into me, something like that. And these very contaminated substances will just get on their bodies. And then if they go on the altar like that, that'll be a serious offense on my part. So therefore, to avoid that, the risk, I came the long way, along the beach. But the sand was very hot. My feet got blistered, and that's what happened. And Lord Caitanya was so pleased with Sanatana Goswami that you undertook this such difficulty and even considerable pain, real discomfort, to just to come and visit me. That's just amazing. I can't believe it. You're just such. Your standard of etiquette and proper behavior is so wonderful. So here comes the verse. Well, one of the verses actually, but the first one. 2 verses. Chaitanya Charitamrita Ansha Leela, chapter 4, verse 129 and 130. Yadyapyu tumi hao jagata pavana, tomasparshe pavitrahaya, deva munigana, tatapi bhakta swabhava, maryada rakshana, maryada palanahaya, sadhura bhushana. My dear Sanatan, this is Lord Chaitanya speaking. My dear Sanatan, although you are the deliverer of the entire universe, and although even the demigods and great saints are purified by touching you, it is the characteristic of a devotee to observe and protect the Vaishnav etiquette. Maintenance of the Vaishnav etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. Oh, this is so profound. And it goes on a bit for a number of verses. And basically, Lord Chaitanya glorifying Sanatana Goswami in these types of ways. And in the end, Lord Chaitanya just grabs him and embraces him like firm embrace. Means all these oozings and stuff go on the body of Lord Chaitanya. And Sanatana Goswami was protesting, but there was nothing he could do. And then Lord Chaitanya released him from the embrace, and Sanatana Goswami saw his body had become completely healed. And there were no signs on Lord Chaitanya's body of any of those contaminations. Yeah. But the point there, it's really, it's a very important point, and it's a really wonderful point. Sadhu Bhushana, Sadhura Bhushana, Bhushana means ornament. Sadhura means of the sadhu. So maintaining the etiquette or the proper behavior of a Vaishnav is the ornament, the decoration of the devotee. Not we, but some may wear jewelry and even makeup and all these types of things because, well, you can ask them because, why? But they do. Even amongst devotees, sometimes they do that. So, okay. But one assumes at least the general idea is that it makes you look better than you really are. Actually, you're really pretty, sort of, who cares? But now you put some things on and a bit of paint, and people think, oh, look, how nice. But if they saw you when you wake up in the morning, whoa, it's a different story. Yeah. So even an ordinary looking person, if they are dressed up, decorated and ornamented in sort of skillful enough ways, even the most ordinary or even less than ordinary person may look very attractive, and people may be quite stimulated in certain ways by seeing them. But for a Vaishnav, that's not what makes a devotee attractive or more attractive or even more attractive. The real factors, the real things which make the devotee attractive or even more attractive is how they conduct themselves as devotees. Yes? And the devotee may be attractive or even more attractive in those terms, how they display the... display means not just like make yourself up artificially, but in natural ways, how they show the wonderful characteristics of a devotee. And they become really very, very beautiful and very attractive. And we could say actually that Srila Prabhupada, because of his incredible qualities, even though, he was an old man, when he was active as a preacher, he was in his 70s. And when you're in your 70s, there's not much you can do about your physical appearance. It's just, the body is just getting worn out. And on top of that, Prabhupada was small. He was 5 foot, 4, or he was physically he was a short person, not a big person. But the devotees, once they learned how to appreciate devotees, the devotees found Prabhupada so attractive. They were just attracted like iron filings to a magnet, just irresistibly attracted. So here's another one. It also involves Sanatana Goswami. It also involves Jiva Goswami. No, it doesn't. It involves Sanatana Goswami and Rupa. What am I talking about? No, Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami, yeah. So, Rupa Goswami at that time was living near what's called Nandagat. It's a part of Vraj Mandala which is just really not visited very, very much at all. Really not much at all. But it's a very sacred place. Nandagat, still there. And he was staying there, and Jiva Goswami, who's his disciple, was assisting him. And Srila Rupa Goswami was writing Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. So there they were, and along came one day one puffed up scholar named Vallabhacharya. And this, he's a Brahmin by birth, and he's actually highly educated and so on. But he was very arrogant and sort of full of himself. And he came along and he said, Rupa, I've heard you are doing some writing. I think that's nice. Would you like me to help you? I could edit your books and make corrections and, help to sort of uplift your writing. And Rupa Goswami is a very humble devotee. He said, oh, that's just very kind. You're Vallabhacharya, you're such a famous scholar and you're willing to help me? Oh, thank you so much. And Vallabhacharya said, yeah, sure, no problem. What are you working on now? Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Can I have a look? So he had a look at some pages. And as Vallabhacharya is looking at these pages, he starts making comments. Well, look, here, you've said this and this. But actually, it would be better if you said something a little different. And then some other point. Yeah, you said this, but you should have said that. And so a number of points he tried to make. And Rupa Goswami, as the humble devotee, is just going, oh, yeah, right, okay, thank you. But Jiva Goswami, as the disciple, and, very high-level scholar, he's listening to all of this, and he's thinking, no. Each time, this is not, what you're suggesting is not right. It should just stay the way it is. So then after a little while, Rupa Goswami invited Vallabhacharya for lunch and told Jiva, take him down to the river. The river's quite near there, Yamuna. And have a bath and come back. And by the time you're back, we'll serve him lunch, our guest. So off went Jiva Goswami and Vallabhacharya. And as they're going down, as they're walking, Jiva Goswami, just from memory, he brings up all the points that this man had tried to make. You said that where Rupa Goswami says this, you said he should say that, but actually you were wrong. And then he explained why he was wrong. And it should just stay the way it is. And he went through all these points. And just really, cut him down to size. Really strongly, very strongly. And when they came back from bathing, Vallabhacharya, he was just really disturbed. And he told Rupa Goswami, this disciple of yours is so heavy. I don't want to stay here. I'm not going to stay for lunch. And he just left. And Rupa, of course, he didn't know what had happened. And he became very upset with Jiva Goswami. And he told him, listen, you're a young man. And this Vallabhacharya, he is your senior. And now you've offended him. He's such a big scholar. He was so kind as to offer to help me. and now you've offended him and chased him away. This is very bad. You have no manners. Go back to Bengal and don't come back until you've learned some manners. And Bengal means a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. Walking. They walked in those days. So that was it. He kicked him out heavily. And Jiva didn't really have a chance to explain. So anyway, Jiva Goswami accepted and he started walking. Nandagat is kind of a little bit like northern Vrajmandala. So he walked down following the Yamuna, still within Vrajmandala. And Jiva Goswami became so disappointed and so disturbed that he decided, I cannot live any longer. I'm not going back to Bengal. He went down to the bank of the Yamuna, found a crocodile hole, and just sat down in there and started chanting Hare Krishna. And the local village people, they saw him, they came down, they offered him food, he refused. So they understood he's fasting, he's going to give up his life. Sanatana Goswami at that time was on a program of permanent Vrajmandal Parikrama. He'd just go around, and when he got around, he'd go around again, and then again. So he came by maybe shortly after, some days or week or whatever it may be after. And the village people, because Sanatana Goswami knew all the village people personally, everyone in every village, and they all knew him. So they all came and told him, there's this young sannyasi. He's in the crocodile hole down by the Yamuna, and he seems very disturbed. And he's fasting. It looks like he's going to fast until he dies. Please help him. So Sanatana went down and met Jiva Goswami, and Jiva explained the whole story. And Sanatana said, okay, just bear with me. Let me see what I can do. So Sanatana Goswami went back to Rupa Goswami. And he didn't just say to him, listen, why did you treat Jiva in that way? You should have heard his side of the story, that sort of thing. He didn't do that because he was extremely respectful towards Rupa Goswami, even though he's senior to him. So Sanatana came to Rupa and said, you know what? You remember when we were with Lord Caitanya, because they both spent quite a lot of time with Lord Caitanya. And you remember what he told us. You remember he told us that we must do Nama Kirtan. Nama Kirtan. And Rupa Goswami said, yes, Nama Kirtan. We must do Nama Kirtan. Great. And Lord Caitanya told us, we must do Bhagavat Shravan. We must hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And Rupa said, yes, that's right. Bhagavat Shravan. Right, we must do Bhagavat Shravan. Wonderful. And we must, Lord Caitanya told us, we must do, Mathura Vas. We must live in the sacred places, like Mathura Vrindavan. Yes, Rupa Goswami said, Mathura Vas Jai. And Sanatana Goswami said, and you remember, Lord Caitanya told us, we must do Jiva Daya. We must be merciful to the Jivas and help them. And Rupa said, yes, Jiva Daya, right, we must be merciful to the Jivas. And Sanatana Goswami said, actually, no. I know one Jiva, and he needs your mercy. And Rupa Goswami understood, oh yes, I see, okay. So then Sanatana explained the whole story, and then he brought Jiva, and Rupa and Jiva were reconciled and reunited. So yes, Sanatana Goswami, very special personality. Let's see now. Well, it's after 8. What time should we go until? Is it? Okay. So let's do another little story about Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. This is a very nice story. You can find it in, it's not in Caitanya Charitamrita or Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's in a book called Bhakti Ratnakara, which is a very transcendental book. Prabhupada quotes from it on numerous occasions in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Rupa Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami, he was he would just sit and chant. And when he was chanting, he would enter into the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. He'd enter into the pastimes. And when he'd enter into the pastimes, he would become oblivious to his situation in this world, where he was, who was around, what was happening, what the conditions were. He just became oblivious. So one day, this was going on. And he was deep in a pastime of Srimati Radharani with Lord Krishna. And in that pastime, the manjaris, the intimate young assistants of Radharani, and some of her other friends, they were decorating Radharani to get her ready for meeting with Lord Krishna. But they were doing it secretly because she wanted to surprise Krishna with some special sort of presentation of herself. So they were kind of hiding away somewhere doing these things. But Krishna found out. And Krishna came sneaking up behind Srimati Radharani, so she didn't notice. And he told all the gopis, don't make a sound. Just act like life is just going on as usual. Nothing unusual at all. So they just carried on. And he came right up behind Srimati Radharani. And there was one gopi there who was making up Radharani's plait. Because Radharani generally, Radharani has long black hair, and generally she keeps it in a single plait. Is plait the right term? A single plait down her back. You know, she's not one of these sort of she keeps her hair tied up. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Tied up in a long plait down her back and we'll tell you something about that. What's our program tomorrow night?
Tomorrow, Spirit Matter.
Oh, okay. So we can't just carry on with more of the... Do we have a program like this?
On Friday.
Thursday. Yeah, because Friday is the Krishna book. So
Thursday you don't have an evening program. Right? You have Bhagavatam class in the morning, but no evening. But you can have an evening program.
okay, let's do it. And we'll just continue with these things. Is that okay? Okay, so what? And today's Tuesday, so day after tomorrow. Okay, so where were we? Yes, Krishna had just come up behind Radharani, and he took over, sort of, whatever they do, binding up her plait and decorating it with flowers and things. And Radharani could feel this. And Krishna's touch is sort of, you could say, it's like electrifying. And Radharani felt, wow, this is amazing. This gopi, because she thought it's still the gopi, this gopi, she feels just like Krishna. Wow, this is wonderful. And Radharani is saying, oh, thank you, that's so nice, do that again. And then at some point they sort of, reaching the point of being finished. And Radharani said, please bring me a mirror. I want to see how I look. So she picked up the mirror and looked, and there was Krishna. And all the gopis just laughed. They just laughed and laughed. And Krishna laughed and Radharani laughed. Everyone just laughed. And Rupa Goswami, who was there in his form as Rupa Manjari, because he's one of those Manjaris, he laughed also. He laughed. And in Vrindavan, where he's sitting chanting his japa, even though he's totally oblivious to the surroundings, his body laughed. He's just sort of looking straight ahead, and he just suddenly laughed. At that time, one elderly Vaishnav was approaching and looking at Rupa Goswami. And this elderly Vaishnav, he was sort of, you could say, kind of like partially disabled. He couldn't walk properly. He's struggling along the path with a stick, and just, it's really, it was very uncomfortable for him. Maybe he was kind of hunchbacked or something like that. And he looks up, oh, there's Rupa Goswami, and Rupa Goswami is looking straight at him. And suddenly Rupa Goswami just laughs while looking straight at him. And what are you meant to think when someone laughs when they're looking straight at you? And this elderly Vaishnava, he didn't know what was going on. And he just thought, wow, I've done something wrong. I've done something very strange. And Rupa Goswami thinks I'm just a joke. I'm just a fool. And he's laughing at me. Oh no, what have I done? Oh. So he turned around and walked away. As he's walking away, he's thinking, how am I going to understand? What have I done? Maybe I did some aparad or some nonsense, or I need to be corrected. What shall I do? I'll go and ask Sanatana Goswami. So off he went to Sanatana Goswami, who was quite nearby, not far away. At that moment, Rupa Goswami found suddenly he's back in external consciousness, back in his body. And he couldn't understand. I was there with Radha and Krishna, Suddenly, I'm just back here. What happened? Something's gone wrong. And he tried again to chant and go back into the pastimes, but he couldn't. So he became anxious that I must have done something wrong. What could I have done? I can't imagine. What could I possibly have done wrong? But I must have. What to do? How will I understand what I've done and what should be done about it? And then he thought, I know. I'll go and ask Sanatana Goswami. So he went to meet Sanatana Goswami, who's just quite close. And so he came approaching, and there's Sanatana Goswami with the elderly Vaishnava, who is telling him the story, who has told him the story. And so they're discussing. And then comes Rupa Goswami. And he tells Sanatana Goswami, you know what happened? This is what happened. Something is wrong. And Sanatana Goswami understood. So he explained to Rupa Goswami, this is actually what happened. Even though there was no offense on your part, but that elderly devotee felt offended and hurt. And as a result, you lost some mercy. And the elderly Vaishnava was there, and he's hearing all of this. And then he offered his obeisances to Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami offered his obeisances to him. They apologized to each other and embraced each other. And it was, by Sanatana Goswami's arrangement, like very wonderful sort of reconciliation. So let me read just a few verses here. They're nice verses from Bhakti Ratnakara. So they've offered obeisances and apologized to each other. So both devotees were very humble. Both were filled with the nectar of pure devotion. They both forgave each other. Then they both became peaceful. They both approached Srila Sanatana Goswami. For many moments they were all plunged in the nectar of talking about Lord Krishna. Everyone heard of this incident with Srila Rupa Goswami. Hearing of it, everyone became filled with wonder. O my brothers and sisters, please be very careful in dealing with the Vaishnavas. Give them even your very breath, so they will forgive your offense. Be careful. Do not see a Vaishnav's faults. Always praise the Vaishnavs. The ancient great devotees say, no one understands the ways of a Vaishnava. Through his dear devotees, Lord Sri Krishna Caitanya has taught this truth to us. Hold the devotee's lotus feet to your head and always dive in the nectar of pure devotional service. Hare Krishna. Srila Sanatana Goswami ki, Srila Rupa Goswami ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Gaur Premanande. Anyone have any comment, question, anything like to bring up? Yes?
Just thinking about the way that people have incarnated between Krishna's pastime and Lord Chaitanya's pastime. You mentioned a few cases like that.
Yeah.
Now, the objective is to get out of the material world, or so we're told.
Yeah.
And yet we see time and time again that the great personalities don't get out of the material world. They repeat the cycle continuously by the looks of things. So what hope for us really is there of getting out of this world?
Okay, that's sort of a fair question in a sense. But, I think you may not be sort of so familiar with the understandings in that regard. Generally speaking, the ones we've been talking about here, like Rupa Goswami, he's Rupa Manjari. In Krishna Leela, Lord Nityananda, he's Lord Balaram. They live in the spiritual world. They just come here from time to time, just to help us. Yeah. So they're not really living in this world. They just visit. And when they visit on their own terms. They don't visit. It's like you could say, and in fact Prabhupada did use the example, of a king or a government official visiting a prison. Occasionally he'll go and check on something. So it's just occasionally. And when he comes, he is one of the higher ups. He's not coming to serve time in a prison. So it's very different from actually being a prisoner. So that's one way of looking at it in some of these cases, where they're not always here, but they just come sometimes and just to help, transcendentally. And after some time they just go back. And it's not like they have to somehow get out and somehow escape the material world. They just go back because they were never implicated in the situation here. And then on another hand, you have, like for example, Lord Krishna with Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Actually, Arjuna, he's another eternal associate of Krishna, but he's always with Krishna in this world. Krishna, he was here 5,000 years ago. Arjuna was here with him. When they finished up, they went to another universe. And after that, they went to another universe. They're just moving around all the time. So, but in principle, it's the same point. Arjuna is not here. Arjuna was not here when he was here in this universe, because he's a conditioned soul like us. He was here in the course of his service to Krishna, which includes having Bhagavad Gita spoken to him time and time and time again, universe after universe. And he's a transcendental personality. He's not conditioned. So he's in the world, but he's not affected by the world at all. No influence. Whereas we're affected. When it's hot, we're hot. When it's cold, we're cold. When the body dies, it's death. But for someone like Arjuna, it's not like that at all. These things are going on and he's completely above it. So, yeah. And then another point, which sort of complicates things further, is that Arjuna is not only here, but he is also actually in the spiritual world at the same time. He expands into this material world. Some of these great devotees, Krishna expands in many forms. We mentioned Krishna, then first expansion, Lord Balaram. Some of the great devotees, they can also expand and be in different places with Krishna at the same time, doing quite different things at the same time in different places. So these, whereas us, you know what it's like. We're in Cape Town. That's all there is to it at the moment, And our bodies, they go through all sorts of changes, fluctuations, and then eventually they die. And it's beyond our control because we're conditioned. We are under the conditions of material life. Therefore we're called conditioned. But people like Arjuna, who is constantly with the Lord in the material world, one place after another, on and on eternally. He's not a resident as we are residents of this world, controlled by the conditions. He's a transcendental personality, and he's with the Lord, and he's fully engaged in the Lord's service, and he's completely unaffected by the conditions of material life. How does that sound?
Something to meditate on. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Holiness Bhakti Caitanya Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna. So I'd like to thank Maharaj for
yeah.
this wonderful class. And Maharaj will be here for the next few days. He'll be here until Monday. And tomorrow Maharaj will give the Bhagavatam class. And in the